My guest today is Dr. Sola Togun-Butler, and she is the founder of Butterfly Counselling Services. She's a psychotherapist and transformative life coach, and she speaks regularly on the importance of mental health and wellness while offering solutions to minimize stress, prevent burnout, and achieve balance. Welcome, Sola.
Thank you. Very excited to be here. It's my pleasure.
I'm very excited to talk to you, especially because of your interest in burnout and trauma and women's wellness in general. But I would like to kick off by asking you, why are you so passionate about preventing burnout?
I'm very passionate about preventing burnout due to the line of work and what I do. And in working with a lot of women, I've realized that the way that women have been socialized, a lot of gender roles, unfortunately, put women on the path to burnout, where we have these thought patterns. For example, I have women saying that they feel guilty putting themselves first, or everybody else's needs comes before their own. And in talking to women, they'll share with me that this is the cultural or societal expectations for them. And then I realize the impact it has on their emotional health and their mental health. So I became very passionate about ways to work with women to address these thought patterns so that they can take better care of themselves and be the person that they want to be.
And I'm guessing, I certainly see it, that women in midlife, they seem to get the burnout lottery ticket.
Yes.
What's your experience on that score?
Yes. My experience in working with women is the idea that they have put their own needs behind. So the belief is I need to take care of my children, I need to take care of my family, and also as they get older and they're going through life transitions, their needs are still being put on the back burner. And the feelings of guilt if they want to do things for themselves. So feeling very guilty about that. And because they feel very guilty about that, it becomes very difficult for them to open up to the idea of burnout prevention or stress management or self-care, or more of what I call a balance. Like you could take care of, others and take care of yourself as well. So some of them have shared with me feelings of resentment, almost like, hey, I'm getting older. There are things I want to do, but I can't because, culturally I'm supposed to focus on now taking care of, my children, or taking care of the household, or managing many of the life transitions that they're going through, as well as their children and family.
And we have all the care responsibilities, don't we? It just gets piled on top of us. So whether it's the children or the older parents, that's our role, isn't it?
Yes, caregiver stress, or what sometimes people have called like the sandwich generation, in the sense that, you're taking care of your children and you're also taking care of your parents. So a lot of them report just a lot of caregiver stress and feeling guilty if they even talk about the stress that they're feeling, or wanting what we call caregiver respite, like just taking a break. They feel a lot of guilt around it. So sometimes, unfortunately, a lot of women just, suffer in silence.
So where do you think the guilt comes from?
I believe the guilt comes from socialization, what women have been taught, or what we've been told, either culturally, by society, or gender roles that are imposed on women. So they feel guilty if they want something different. So if I've been taught that as a mother, my children's needs are always first, I should not even consider putting my needs first, then I feel guilty if I'm feeling resentful. So if maybe I'm feeling resentful, like I don't have any time to myself, but I feel really guilty because I shouldn't think this way. I hear that a lot, the shoulds. I should not think this way. I should not desire a break from my children.
It's a horrible word, isn't it? Should.
It's a horrible word.
We have to do away with the word should.
Yes, we talk about the shoulds, so that's why they feel guilty, because they feel guilty because they should not think or should not feel this way.
So how can we get beyond feeling guilty?
To me, it's changing the thought patterns. It's what I call cognitive restructuring and reframing. How do we break down these thoughts and replace them with positive thoughts? And that's what I work with my clients on doing. So how do we take this negative thought and break it down and restructure it in a more positive way? So it becomes what I call the AND, A-N-D, instead of should. I can take care of my kids and take care of myself. I can put myself first and still be present for others. So we break down the shoulds and we replace them with the ands. That two things can be true. That you can take care of yourself, look out for yourself, and still take care of and be present for others as well.
That's a very simple tip, isn't it? But a very powerful tip.
Yes.
I like that.
Yes. We call it the ands. It's an and world, is what I like to tell my clients. Two things can be true.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And them coexisting does everybody good.
It does, because it's some of the thought patterns are what we call all or nothing thinking, where it's like it has to be this or the other. So I teach my clients that's come from or to and, where two things can be true. So this is known as dialectical thinking, in the sense that dialectical thinkers report less feelings of guilt, less anxiety, and less depression, because their thought patterns is more open to two things being true as opposed to one or the other.
And do you find that we get more rigid as we get older? So we're talking about trying to open up ways of thinking. Do we get ourselves into sort of cul-de-sacs where we can't get out because we've become more rigid in our thinking, or is it more about the circumstances we find ourselves in?
I think it's more about the circumstances we find ourselves in. So a lot of our thinking patterns has to do with, society and how we were brought up and how we were taught to see the world, because culture really impacts our worldview. So if I was brought up to, maybe more open-minded, see things differently, I might view the world more as a dialectical thinker. But if I grew up where I was told this is the only way to see things, this is the only way to perceive things, then I'm more likely to have a rigid way of thinking. And not to say I won't be open to other perspectives, but it probably would be more difficult compared to someone that grows up in an environment where they are allowed to be more of like a free thinker, where a lot of things can be true as opposed to just one thing being the absolute truth.
And does your own personal cultural background help you get to that? Is that where you've been throughout your life, or is that something that you've discovered through your training?
I've discovered that through my training, because I would say culturally, a lot of free thinking was kind of frowned upon. It's like these were the expectations. You didn't question the expectations. You took them at face value. If you were questioning them, sometimes it wasn't rewarded to question them. So you just accepted culturally what you were told. It was when I got older and through my training as a therapist that I began to realize, like, you know what? Dialectical thinking is actually a lot better. Like, two things can be true at the same time. It doesn't necessarily have to be one way of seeing things. So I would say it was more of my training as a therapist, because culturally, you weren't allowed a lot of what I would call free thinking. You just took things at face value, and you did not question things because it was considered to be disrespectful if you were pushing back against culturally what you were being taught and what you were being told.
And is that the Nigerian aspect of your culture or the American aspect?
I would say the Nigerian aspect of my culture, being Yoruba, just growing up and being taught certain things. And you took it at face value, because to question adults was considered to be disrespectful. Now that I'm Nigerian American, I felt like, American culture, a little bit more free thinking. You don't necessarily have to accept that this is true. You can explore, other truths as well. But there are other aspects of American culture where it is frowned upon if you think outside the box, per se.
Do you think so? That surprises me.
I think so. I would say maybe sometimes politically, the idea that you're either in this political party or you're not.
Yeah,
and if you're a member of this, very polarized.
Yeah.
If you are a member of this political party, you cannot believe in something else. So I noticed that as well.
Yes.
Politically, it's very, very all or nothing. And
There's
not
no
as dialectical.
gray, is there?
There's no gray. There is no gray in that particular area. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's fascinating, actually. Yes, I hadn't sort of made that that link, but yes, you're absolutely right. And I think the Western world, certainly the UK, is going that way as well in terms of this, you know, polarization of views.
Yes.
On all sorts of things, including, you know, my world, including, you know, menopause and women aging. It's become very polarized and very much, I'm gonna take some of your thinking actually, because it's very much, so we have an issue here in the UK where menopause is split into two camps, and there's the camp that want to take hormone therapy, and there's the so-called natural camp. Now, I'm more in the natural camp, but I did take hormone therapy. And by natural, I don't mean not take hormone therapy. I mean you need to sort out your diet and your exercise and your stress management and your burnout and all of that stuff.
Right.
And you can still take hormone therapy. But
Yes.
what's happened is it's become so polarized that now you've got the two sides just clashing all the time. And yet we can just say the two things can exist for the same woman.
Exactly.
Absolutely. It's not an either or.
Right. And that's when that polarization happens. Yes, when we see it as one or the other and not seeing the common ground. Like, what is the commonality here that can really bring us together? But because people are so polarized, they're not willing to see it. Or to see the other person's perspective, when at the end of the day, the goal is the same. We may have different ways of achieving the goal, but what's the commonality that we have when it comes to this particular issue? So that's why the concept of being a dialectical thinker is very important to me, not just as a practitioner, but also, you know, as a woman, you know, as a human being, to be able to see things from different perspectives and try to find that common ground.
Do you find that easier as you get older?
I do. I find it easier as I get older because I'm always interested in different perspectives. Because I feel that sometimes when we have a particular worldview, we only listen or welcome that particular worldview. We're not willing to listen to somebody else's worldview. And I find that the more that I listen to ideas that differ from my own, it helps inform the decision that I make at the end. It's almost like when I was doing my dissertation, one thing my chairperson told me is you also have to gather research that doesn't necessarily support your hypothesis and understand that perspective as well. And I found that to be very powerful because it helped inform, you know, in putting together my research study, another perspective on what I was looking at. So as I get older, again, maybe it's because of my training, maybe it's a pushback against, you know, culturally some of the things that I was taught, that I'm always looking to different perspectives and wanting to know how can I become a dialectical thinker? How can both things be true for me? Because it really is good for my mental, emotional, and cognitive health to have that balance.
And there's research as well that not only is it a good thing to do, to read, so I make a point of reading news sources that are not in line with my political thinking.
Yes.
That are, you know, I try to read diverse sources. I don't always succeed in doing that, but I really try. But we've also, there's research out there that says it's actually good for our brain as we get older, as we age, to have these different viewpoints and different sources, because we can get more rigid as we get older in our thinking. And yet I happen to think midlife, I mean, I see certainly in this sort of time of life, I just get more and more curious. I want more and more information. I want to understand more. And I see a lot of women doing that in this time of life, if they can get beyond, you know, the issues of the burnout, you know, to be able to still take on different opinions and views.
Yes, and curiosity is what helps us with the growth process, because we want to learn more, and also maybe realizing that some of the things that we have been taught to believe are not necessarily true. And that's when that research, that curiosity sparks, begins to take hold, especially as you start to get older. As I've noticed for myself, as I'm, getting into my 50s, it's like, oh, I took this at face value, but now I'm really curious about it. I want to see it from a different perspective, which is why travel is something I'm very passionate about, where you get to travel and you're like, oh, I was told this, but now in meeting with people and learning about their culture, it's nothing that was, shown to me necessarily in the media. It's something very different, and that also helps inform my personal growth and how I see the world.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, I love travel as well. I love to understand different cultures and get new ideas. I'm always trying to do that.
Yes.
So I think, do you work a lot with trauma as well? Is that a big part of what you do?
Yes, I do work with people who have experienced, trauma. And trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event that a person has gone through. So I have worked with people who have gone through childhood trauma, people who have gone through, sexual assault, and also people who are dealing with, racial trauma. As racism, oppression, discrimination continues to be very much an issue in a society, in which I live. So people have either experienced, racial trauma, had family members who've experienced racial trauma, so they reach out to me with help around trauma, and also vicarious trauma, where it didn't happen to you, but you witnessed it happen to somebody else, and you're very much impacted by that, traumatic event.
So how do you help people, especially women, and especially say midlife women? How do you help them come to terms with or move on from trauma?
The most important thing is that therapy creates a safe space where a lot of women have felt that they were not able to talk about the traumatic experience that they had been through. So therapy creates the space where emotionally they could talk about the traumatic event. And that's very, very important, because there's a lot of emotions associated with going through trauma. So what we do is create the safe environment, the client talks about the trauma, and then we help them process the emotions around it. And how do we begin to release the emotions in a healthy way? Because a lot of the emotions it's caused depression, it's caused anxiety, it's caused a variety of mood disorders that they're experiencing. So we take those emotions, we process them, we understand them, and then what is the release of that emotion depending on what the trauma is. So if the trauma is around the loss of a loved one, it becomes, what are some rituals that we could do on a daily basis to remember that person, to honor their legacy? What are some things that we can do? If it's the trauma of losing a pregnancy, what is the name that we can give a child that was lost, especially feeling like they cannot talk about the trauma? And that's the number one thing that I realize. A lot of women feeling that they cannot talk about what they've been through. So they're holding all of this inside. And that's what caused a lot of the emotional suffering around trauma. So being able to release it in a safe therapeutic environment, I find is very, very helpful for a lot of women. And also for women in midlife, where they feel like, now this is really coming forward for me, because I was able to put in the back burner raising my children, but now the kids are gone, and now it's really coming to the forefront for them. So having that therapeutic space to process the emotion is the number one thing I do when working with a lot of women who are dealing with trauma.
I think midlife and certainly sort of pushed along by menopause can be the sort of perfect storm. You've got the burnout there, you've got the trauma resurfacing.
Yes.
In my book I write a whole section about dealing with unresolved issues, and I have this theory that they all come back to bite us in the bum during menopause and midlife, because it's almost like the bodies and the psyche is doing this midlife spring clean.
Yes.
And we're sort of getting rid of all of the stuff that doesn't serve us anymore, so that we can move on into the next chapter of our lives.
Yes.
I don't know do you ever see anything like that women are particularly either interested or in need of this kind of support in midlife?
Absolutely. They're seeking therapy, reaching out for therapy midlife because, again, like you mentioned, as they're beginning to transition in different areas of their life, so again, going through menopause, maybe the kids have now left the home, they're now beginning to turn inward and realize that, oh, there are a lot of things that were going on with me that I did not address personally for me. So while they're doing what they call the spring cleaning outwardly, as they're beginning to look inwardly, they're realizing like, wow, there's all these things here that I really need to address. So it could be past trauma that's unresolved, that they did not work through. It could be realizing at that point, midlife, that culturally, a lot of the things that I was taught as a woman did not serve me. And now I want something different as I begin to transition into this new chapter. And what does that look like? And I have a lot of women midlife that come to therapy saying, as I'm doing this spring cleaning externally, I'm beginning to realize that I need to do work internally because I need to let the person that I truly am now begin to find her voice. Now.
Yay! Oh, I've got goosebumps.
And that's very exciting. And that's very, very exciting. They want her to come out and now find her voice that has been suppressed for all these years.
It's like a rebirth, isn't it?
Yes.
I really do feel it is like a rebirth.
Yes, yes. And it's
if
very,
only
very
we
exciting.
can lean into it and embrace it and go down that curiosity path, because I think for a lot of women it's too scary. I don't know whether you see that as well, but I see it. You know, it's much easier to maintain the status quo. It might not be great, but change is scary, and doing the inner work is scary. And I see this a lot with menopause, particularly because women, if they're not feeling great, they just want a pill to make them feel better. They're not willing to do the work, and a lot of it, I think, is psychological work. It really is, because we are evolving, we are changing, our bodies are changing, our minds are changing, and there's a lot to be gained if we're willing to do the work. But so many of us aren't. I find are not willing to do the work.
Yes, a lot of fear around it. And that's why I do commend women that reach out, because that's the first step, is reaching out and saying that I want to be my authentic self, because for so long I've had to bury my authentic self. And the fear is centered around the people around them. How are they going to react to the new me? Am I going to be accepted? Am I going to be shunned culturally? And that's what holds some women back, is that fear that others might not be able to embrace the authentic them because they've been relating to who they were all these years. And now all of a sudden, when I say, well, this is really me, they might not want to accept that. And that is the fear, unfortunately, that holds a lot of women back from really embracing, their authentic selves.
So how do you encourage them to move forward regardless? So if, for example, a woman comes along and she knows that if she starts making the changes she wants to make, her family's not going to like it, her partner might not like it, her children might not like it, her parents might not like it. How can you help her then? What can you offer her in terms of support to enable her to be who she wants to be despite all of the conflict potentially?
Sure. And it's preparing clients for the conflict. It's understanding that it's going to happen. And that's the disclaimer that I tell my clients, that when we start to embark on change, a lot of the people around us are used to relating to us the way that we were. So when we start to change, it's not uncommon that they might fight against that. So they're going to try to pull you back to the person that you used to be. And that's very common when we start setting healthy boundaries. When we no longer allow ourselves to be walked over, when we start to stand up for ourselves, people don't like that. So the expectation is their behavior is going to get a lot worse before it gets better. They want to pull us back. So they're going to push up against the boundaries. So I prepare my clients for that. Be prepared for others to push against these healthy boundaries that you're setting for yourself. Another way to address that is to communicate. So I work with my clients around assertive communication to let other people know, these are the changes I'm starting to make. These are the changes that you are going to be seeing And let's address some of the concerns that you might have around that. So it's almost in a way, as we begin to prepare ourselves for change, we're preparing the people around us so that they become aware that these are the expectations moving forward. These are the healthy boundaries I'm going to begin to set in these relationships. So that's the preparation that I work with my clients around, is realistic expectations. Because they think, oh, the new me, oh, they're going to embrace it. Everyone's going to be super happy. Not necessarily. They might not be super happy because now they have to change. Because they have to change how they relate to you. So it's the expectations, it's the communication, and it's the ongoing support in therapy as they embark on their authentic self, and then reminding themselves why they feel that this change is important. Because whenever we're working towards a goal, I always tell my clients, remind yourself why this goal is important to you, especially when you're dealing with, barriers and potential obstacles.
Because you want to keep your eye on the prize, don't you?
Yes.
Despite the difficulties.
Despite the difficulty. So the reminders are very important. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And this is why this is important to me.
And ultimately, we have a right to live the life that we want to live, don't we?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why, again, midlife, it really comes to the forefront. Am I living the life that I want to live? Now that I'm, halfway through my life, is this really what I want to do? And that's what I see with a lot of women, those questioning. They start to ask themselves those questions. Is this the life that I want to live? Am I being true to myself? Am I taking care of myself? Am I putting myself first? And those questions I find to be very powerful because it begins to put a lot of women on the path to want to start making these changes.
Yeah, and as I said, it's very exciting. I mean, it excites me. I just love it, and I love to see. I'm interested actually because I can see you on camera, and I can see behind you there's lots of butterflies. And is that because you're in the business? Oh, your consultancy is called Butterfly Counselling Services. Is that because you're in the business of transformation? I presume it is, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And that's what I love about butterflies. One of my favorite sayings talk about the fact that the butterfly is proof that no matter how long we've been in darkness, we could still change and be the person that we want to be. Because butterflies represent transformation. Because some people feel like, I've been doing this for so long, there's no way that I can make this transformation. And then remind them of the butterfly, that the butterfly is in darkness for a long period of time and still becomes, something beautiful. So yes, that's why I love butterflies, because to me, they represent the transformation that we can all make, no matter what we have been through.
Yeah, it's very pretty, your wall behind. I've been admiring your butterflies as we talk.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, what are some more effective strategies for preventing the burnout? Obviously, we've got to acknowledge what's going on and the pressures on us, but what can we do? So for example, if we don't have access to a therapist, and a lot of people don't, and a lot of people don't want to go to a therapist. I am a huge therapy fan. I've had years of it, so, and I know about boundary setting, but what about somebody who is completely new to this? What can they do to prevent the burnout and to try and take more control of their life as they want to live it?
Sure. The one thing I always advise is when it comes to burnout, for example, sometimes we're more reactive. It's like after we've broken down physically or emotionally is when we start to incorporate burnout prevention techniques. So one thing I advise people to do is more of a preventive measure. What are some things that I could do every single day to take care of myself? Because when we think of burnout prevention, people are thinking, oh, it's an hour in the gym. It's, 45 minutes of doing this. I just don't have the time. So I tell people, what is something that you can do in as little as 5 to 10 minutes a day to take care of yourself? So it could be going for a walk, listening to music, maybe it's meditation, just something every day that gives you what we call that respite. So people will say to me, you know what, I do have 5 minutes, I do have 10 minutes. So I say, go to your schedule, look at your Google Calendar and see if there's a 5-minute break that you can put in there and do something that we call like a nervous system reset. It could be the deep breathing. It could be soothing with my senses by listening to something relaxing. So that's what I, encourage people to do. Because I think when it comes to physical health, we all know preventative. There are things we need to do.
Yes.
So preventing burnout, what are some preventative measures that we can take as well?
And it's always so much better if we can do it ahead of time instead of
Yes.
getting to the burnout and then having to cope with it because everything's flying around all over the place and we're in a mess.
Yes, exactly. So more of a preventative measure. And it's just doing the things that we enjoy, the things that, give us pleasure and can cause us to really, really relax and have the break that we need.
Mm. And what about self-compassion? How do you help women practice a bit more self-compassion?
Self-compassion is so important because if we have self-compassion, it really puts us on the path to make the changes that we want to make. So what is self-compassion? It's being kind to ourselves. That is self-compassion. So I tell people, if somebody else was going through the exact same thing that you're going through, how would you speak to that person? Now I want you to turn around and speak to yourself the exact same way. Because we show compassion more to others than we do to ourselves.
Absolutely.
So I tell people, do that all the time. Practice that. Even if you can do a voice note. Pretend that your friend is going through the exact same thing that you're going through. Take your voice note and say what you would say to your friend. And then play it back and say the exact same thing to yourself. And people are surprised how much compassion they show others. Because if we engage in self-defeating thoughts, we just beat ourselves down and it leaves us in this hole. Oh, you're no good. You'll never figure this out. It's not going to get better. What's the point of all this? Whereas if I say to myself, it's okay. You'll figure it out. Mistakes happen. You've got this. You know you have it within you to get this done. Then it puts me on the path to working on something. So that's the difference between self-compassion and self-defeating thoughts. Be kind to yourself the same way that you would to a friend who's going through the exact same thing that you're going through.
I think the voice note is a great idea. It's very, again, it's simple but very powerful because the human voice is very powerful.
Yes.
And and also it's interesting because I increasingly leave voice notes for people, and I just listen back to check them, and you can put a tone of voice on very easily, can't you, if you're imagining it's somebody else, whereas, as you say, you're going to be quite, short, potentially, with yourself.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And that's why, the power of the human voice, they always say that we need to be careful what we're saying because our mind is listening. And our mind is taking it in. So we want to make sure our mind is taking in a lot of our positive words and positive self-affirmation.
Now, we've talked a little bit about your Nigerian culture and how that has impacted you. Do you see any differences between mainstream US culture and Nigerian culture, between how the status of women as we get older? Because it's not very good in American culture, I don't think, and it's not very good in UK culture. Is it any better in Nigerian culture or not?
I would say it's better in Nigerian culture just because I feel like as women get older, it's almost like you're revered. Like we're taught to respect older adults, and they're a source of wisdom, and to listen to what they have to say. Because they've lived through life and they've lived through experiences. So I felt that, women, as they get older, are very, very much respected in Nigerian culture because of the wealth of knowledge based on their life experiences that they can share with you, and the sharing down of the culture. Whereas I feel like in America, when, women are getting older, it's almost like a different perspective. It's almost like, oh, you're over the hill, and what do you have to bring, or maybe the way that you see the world has nothing to do with the way that things are being done right now. So I do see that difference in terms of how, women are perceived as they're getting older, where Nigerian culture is more like your life experiences, you bring a lot to the table, and it should be respected and revered, whereas I feel like in American culture it's more like, oh, you're over the hill, and that's an old way of thinking, and we don't think that way anymore. So it's not received in the same way as you start to get older.
I suspected that. I'm always very interested to find other cultures that do aging differently.
Yes.
And I suspected that. So it's nice to hear that it's different. Now, my next question is, do you think that age positivity for women especially has any impact on their experience of menopause?
100%.
Oh,
100%. Yes, absolutely.
In what way?
Because again,
I'm not feeding you words here. I'm just going, yeah, that's right. That's the answer I want. Yes, please.
yes, because again, when we're feeling very positive about the fact that we're getting older and our world experiences and what we bring to the table, and understanding that menopause is part of that, and we can talk about it openly, it does help the process, because you feel like there's a lot that you can bring to the table. You feel the support. You know that you're not alone in what you're going through, so that this new person that you're becoming as you're getting older is actually enhanced in a lot of ways.
Yes.
So I think it's the age positivity and going through menopause is so important, because the perspective changes. Because again, when we look in terms of society and how menopause is perceived, it's seen unfortunately negative. Like, okay, now here's a sign that you're getting older, or that you're over the hill, like I said before, and what is it that you have to contribute? But when it's seen as something positive, like I'm transitioning into this new person, into this new self, then the whole experience itself, body, mind, spirit, is seen positively, and it enhances the whole experience, especially having a support group and knowing that you're not alone in what you're going through and this transition that I feel is very, very powerful. So menopause is seen as transitioning, as a lot of women have now shared with me, into this new self, into this new chapter, and you're looking forward to it in a very positive way, as opposed to, unfortunately, some of the negativity that is associated with menopause.
I've written about it in this Anglo-Saxon cultures in my book, and the US, the UK, Australia, I think are particularly bad when it comes to ageism, but especially gendered ageism. And then there is a correlation, and there's lots of other things going on as well, of course, but there's a correlation with experience of menopause, because, as you say, if we fear something, if we feel it's a big tattoo across our forehead saying you're past it and you're of no value anymore, then we're bound to not like it, not want it, fight it, and have a difficult experience of it. But I think we have so much to learn from other cultures where women, as you say, are revered as they get older. Absolutely.
Because, like you mentioned before, a lot of that negativity around menopause becomes internalized. And then we believe it. And that is also, once we internalize it, becomes part of that, like, self-defeating thoughts almost. Whereas if it is seen as something, positive, it's a life transition. Now I'm moving into another chapter in my life. The way that I feel about it, the way that I think about it is completely different. And that's, to me, what I've loved about my Nigerian culture, is to see just how women, as they get older, are just revered, and they're respected, and they're adored.
Let's all move to Nigeria. That's what I want, but that's what I want for older women. I get so cross, and I get so cross because what you see, because US and UK culture is so world dominant,
Yes.
People think that this is how it has to be. This is the way it is. This is the world. And it isn't. Because there are examples of other cultures who do it so much better.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
And every culture's got their own issues. But
Right.
on this particular issue, this is something that we can say, okay, let's look at that culture. Let's take what they're doing well and adopt it to ours, and not assume that ours is the only way.
Yes, and that's the power of traveling, where you travel and you see ways in which it's done differently, or being a therapist and making sure that my work is culturally competent and culturally sensitive. So I have to learn about other cultures and learning how, you know, women are treated, older women are treated in other cultures. And just like you said, this doesn't have to be the way, and that we can learn from other cultures the wealth of knowledge and value that, you know, women as they get older continue to contribute to society. So they should not be discarded. They're not over the hill. It doesn't mean they have nothing to contribute. And unfortunately, you know, women in our society have internalized, you know, those negative, what I call those very, very negative messages, you know, as they get older.
Well, I'm very, very pleased that your clients have got you on their side and you as their therapist, because you can bring so much of this age positivity to their understanding of the world, which is so different probably to what they experience day to day.
Yes. I remember I had shared with my parents when I got my first gray hair. I was very excited.
Me too. I get white hairs in the fringe and I go, oh, it's my wisdom streaks. Look, there is this one.
Yes, I was so excited. I'm like, yes, you know.
Oh.
You know, whereas, wonderful. You know, you have commercials telling women, you know, dye your hair, or women should be ashamed. I was super excited. I'm looking forward to my 50th birthday. I'm like, wow,
good for
50.
You. Good for you.
You know, so I feel like a lot of that comes from the Nigerian aspect of my culture, where it is very, very much celebrated. You know, as you know, getting older, it's a wonderful, beautiful, beautiful transition.
So I love it. I love everything that you've got to say. So just as we wind up, what are your parting thoughts for my listeners? What would you most like them to know?
I would want your listeners to know that it is so important for us to love ourselves, and to know that we are deserving of love, and we are deserving of transition, and deserving to self-actualize and be the person that you want to be, and to pour into ourselves, because we are so deserving of it. Because as women, we give so much in so many areas of our lives, and it's equally important that we give that energy back to ourselves as well. And to know that as we transition, as we get older, that we do have support, and there are people out there who can support us as we're making these amazing transitions. Because I'm well aware that not everybody lives in a society where they have that support, but to know that they can always reach out and find that support, not only within themselves, but with, you know, outside of themselves and around others as well. And that kind of highlights the importance of a support system. But again, most importantly, love yourself, be kind to yourself, pour into yourself, and to know that you can be the person that you want to be.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, follow, and share it. Also, giving a 5-star review really helps get the word out. You'll find the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you can get my book, Magnificent Midlife, Transform Your Middle Years, Menopause, and Beyond. Make the very best of your next chapter. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.